on the NewsChannel 5 network. This is OpenLine.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to OpenLine. Glad you are with us tonight. Mayor John Cooper announced his budget proposal today. He had said we will need a sharp property tax increase. Today we learned just how sharp that increase will be and exactly what he meant by that. He is proposing a 32% property tax increase. A home worth $300,000 would pay about $750 more a year in taxes. Now, as far as the other headlines, no pay raises for Metro employees, but if this budget were to pass, there would be no layoffs. And of course, the coronavirus is responsible for the big budget mess we are in. We are short some $470 million as a result of the shutdown over 16 months is what they're saying. We are happy to have with us Pat Nolan, who can help us break down all of this, our political analyst. Pat, thank you for being here.
Hi, man. Good to be here.
And it's also nice to have you here live and in person. I'm so used to having people in Zoom, but you're just kind of across the studio.
But socially distanced.
We're socially distanced. What stands out for you in this budget?
Well, I guess the amount of revenue lost, how quickly it was. I mean, the Metro had to spend just about whatever cash reserves it has just to get through to the end of June. That's the end of this fiscal year. And we didn't start having the hemorrhaging of money because of the shutdown until about the middle of March. So to lose that much money, and it's quite a bit, hundreds of millions of dollars for that, it's pretty. I've never seen a budget. I've watched Metro budgets being debated and adopted dating all the way back to the early 70s. I've never seen one like this. It's amazing that it's not, I guess in some ways it's not worse than this. I suspect there'll be a lot of debate about it. Tax increases are always subject to a lot of debate, but this will be subject to debate like we've never seen before, because it'll also be subject to debate in the middle of all the rules about the pandemic. And right now we're in the stay-home orders, and the council was struggling to have public hearings about this. Normally there's always public hearings, 1 or 2 for these budget processes, but right now I'm not sure how the council will be able to hold one of those, because they won't be able to come to you can't come to council meetings right now because they're all being held online and virtually.
And there's so many unknowns about this budget right now, not just whether we'll be able to have a public budget hearing, but will the economy open up as scheduled? And what happens if we have to go through this all again in the winter? And that is, I guess, at least somewhat accounted for in the presentation. But what about some of that information?
Well, the mayor had some numbers in there that were, I think he said this was the scariest thing of all the various slides he had in his presentation. Right now he is saying if the recovery phases take longer than they appear to right now, and right now we haven't really started setting dates for that, but it could have an additional impact on the upcoming year's budget of $20 to $40 million. And if we get into the fall and we have safer at home orders back in place, say in November and December, so we don't begin the recovery process all over again until January. That would be if we had a second spike of the coronavirus or we had the regular flu, and those two together put us back into a lockdown. That's another $110 million. And he didn't really give an answer for how we'd handle that if it happened, but that would certainly be unbelievable from a financial point of view. I'm not sure how Metro would be able to handle that. Remember, we have to have a balanced budget. We're not the federal government. You just don't decide to spend money and keep printing it through the printing presses. States like that too, and we're not alone with that. The mayor also gave out some numbers today across the country. He claims there are 2,100 cities across the country that are anticipating budget shortfalls, much like what's going on here in Nashville. Almost 600 cities, he says, are predicting layoffs. 1,100 cities are preparing to reduce services. 1,000 cities contemplating those reduced services to include public safety departments. So I think he feels like he's put together, given all the circumstances, a pretty good budget when nobody is going to have to get laid off. Nobody's going to get pay raises either, but nobody's going to get laid off. There are no furloughs involved in this. Of course, it is going to be an extra tax increase. He would come back by saying that we'll still have a lower tax increase, a tax rate, than any other major city in Tennessee, where ours goes from $3.15 to $4.15 on the rate. That still puts us below Knoxville, still puts us below Chattanooga, still puts us below Memphis. Obviously, people who are having a problem because of what's happened with the virus, they've lost their job, they're not sure where they're going to pay, how they're going to pay for the next round of groceries, much less pay their property taxes. That's not going to be much consolation, but it's going to be a heck of a discussion, maybe unlike anything we've ever had in the history of Metro, the mother of all budgets.
It will be a heck of a discussion. The property tax rate will go up $1, as you said, from $3.15 to $4.15. So a $1 increase. My question is, do you think the mayor envisions a lot of room for debate here? In other words, is he asking for more than he expects to get, or does he expect to get every bit of that? You know, what could we cut if we don't get the full increase he's asking for?
He didn't really discuss that much. He did at one point say if the council didn't want to do this. Now, I don't know whether he meant do everything or do nothing at all. He said, obviously, if we did nothing at all, he said we'd be looking into very serious and profound layoffs, and we'd probably have to start those almost right away. Usually there's wiggle room in these things. There's what the mayor proposes, and then usually there's a couple of different groups in the council. Some groups in the council that comes in and say, well, we're going to do something, and our number is X, below what the mayor's is Y. And then there's usually another number, a bunch of people who say, well, we don't want any at all, and they're down the bottom. Or there's some that say, well, we want something, but it's below what X and Y is. I suspect this council understands there needs to be some kind of increase. Even the most conservative ones in the council have indicated that we probably need to do something. Remember, this council for the last 2 years has come close to passing property tax increases on their own over the objections of then Mayor David Briley. That had never happened before, even to have objections like that to a tax increase. Now, the council has always tried to come up with their own budgets to change what the mayor's going to do, and I suspect you'll see that happen again. We may see it going around. The mayor wants to use some of this money to build up the city's cash reserves back to around $100 million. Some people say, well, what could we get away with $90 million? Could we get away with $60 million? Something like that, and try to see what they can do extra about that. The mayor's probably going to come back and say, look, our reserves were already low. We're only building them back up to where they were. They were already more or less inadequate, and one of the reasons Metro got in as much trouble as, remember, Metro had budget issues last year. We came into the fiscal year last year $40 million in the hole because the council didn't approve a budget last year, so Mayor Briley's budget went in by default, and that budget was $40 million on its face out of balance. And we spent a good bit of the last part of last year getting the budget in shape. That seemed to be in pretty good shape, and then along comes the tornado on March 3rd, then along comes the pandemic, and they've just they've been bleeding red ink ever since.
Bleeding red ink. The mayor calls this a crisis budget. He says it's not a discretionary budget. No pay raises for Metro employees. Metro employees have certainly waited and waited and waited. They waited during the good times. We have now hit very difficult times, and they're being asked to wait again. It's understandable, but I wonder what they feel, and I'm certainly open to hearing from Metro employees. Give us a call. What do you think? The mayor is saying what we need to do is avoid layoffs. But what do you think the reaction is, Pat? That here we go again, no raise for Metro employees.
I'm sure they're going to be very disappointed about it. I think, on the other hand, they're going to be happy that they're not winding up having to lay people off to give people a raise. And I would say that in terms of pay raises, there was a pay raise for city workers. It was very small last year. There was also an additional 3% raise given to teachers, but that was only funded for half a year, so I'm assuming the budget the mayor's putting in does fund the second half of that 3% raise the teachers got after the budget went into effect last year. Mayor Briley said there was some additional money. He was going to do that, and eventually when Mayor Cooper took office, he thought that was a good idea, and the council approved it, but there was only 6 months of money in there because it didn't take effect till January. That's going to, I assume, unless they're going to cut that part of it out, and I can't believe that would be part of it. That would be a real bad whammy out of that. So I think that's what's going to happen with that. I know the city unions will not be happy about it at all. Some people will be unhappy that we're not going to be able to do more for affordable housing. We're not going to be able to do more of the police cameras. He already mentioned that earlier in the week at one of his briefings on the virus. We knew that was coming, but a lot of disappointment because I think the council was really poised to do a tax increase, but to do a tax increase to do something. Usually when you're trying to sell a tax increase, you're telling people how employees are going to get a raise, we're going to get these additional or supplemented services or new services. This is just to basically keep body and soul together, just to keep from having to lay off people, just to continue the level of services at roughly what they are right now. That's a little harder to sell.
That is harder to sell. And what do you look for now as the debate moves forward? Who are you interested in hearing from? We had Bob Mendez on this show. He's certainly the finance chair, somebody who's pushed for a property tax increase the last couple of years. What voices are you looking to hear from in the coming day or so? I
think Bob's is going to be one of the most important, if not the most important, if for no other reason that he's the chairman of the Budget and Finance Committee. When the mayor's budget comes to the council, he will be the main sponsor of it. That's the way it's always been done. If you sponsor the budget and the tax levy, legislation when it goes through the council. Doesn't always mean you're for everything in it, but I think where he wants to come down to is he can completely support what the mayor wants to do, come up with his own plan. And I think Steve Glover probably will also offer a different alternative budget that will be much lower than that. How much lower, I don't know. He's already got a resolution that he's put before the council that's a memorializing resolution. It has no real impact in law that would give people who've been shut down primarily because of the coronavirus some kind of rebate back on their property taxes or their business taxes. Probably more for what's happened since March, because remember, everybody had to pay their property taxes by February, so that they won't be getting rebates back on what they've already done. I'm not sure legally that's allowed. Somebody in the council mentioned to me that that was allowed under state law. He probably would have introduced that as an ordinance, not as a memorializing resolution. But you'll see a couple of different, perhaps alternative budgets, and then we'll sort of see what kind of room to negotiate does the mayor have between where Mendez is and where he is. And that's what you talked about before. What areas might there be some leeway? The mayor didn't mention any leeway. Of course, it's too early in the process to do that. When mayors are successful, they build coalitions so that the budget, not just the mayor's, it becomes sort of shared between the council and the mayor. And over the years, when we've had successful property tax increases, there's usually been some give and take on that. This is a little different. Perhaps there's not a lot of give and take because the money's the money, and if the money's not there, it's not like we have a bunch of reserves to fall back on because we had to spend all those reserves just to get to the end of this fiscal year.
Do you think there could be a budget proposed that would try and do more, that would try and give raises? I mean, could we stand more than this kind of a raise? Could that be out there just for a debate? Could there be a budget proposed, that would be a lower increase and maybe there would be layoffs? Is there a council member who would propose laying off Metro employees? What do you think the boundaries of this debate may be?
I would be surprised if we found 21 council members who were in favor of giving employees a raise and laying other employees off. I think the optics of that and the politics of that would be pretty bad. I don't think that would happen. As to whether people would go and bite the bullet and go beyond a $1 tax increase, I think that will be hard too, simply because it's going to be all he can do, I think, for the mayor to be able to convince the council to increase property taxes by 32%. That's a pretty big whop at one time. I think it's about as big an overall increase when you look at what the tax base is today as we've ever seen. There was a tax increase that was proposed by Mayor Fulton back in 1980, 40 years ago. He proposed a $2.87 increase on the rate. Now, in those days, they didn't require the tax base to be reappraised every 4 years. They do that now. In 1980, the tax base was way out of whack. It was way below what the market should have been. So the mayor asked for a rate increase that big so he could get the money he thought he needed. The council did approve $1.50 of that, roughly. Then they also put a referendum on the ballot to raise the sales tax, and that was approved by voters. So the ultimate increase in the property tax that year was somewhere in the 80 to 85 cent range. Could that happen again? Yes, Metro still has a half-cent increase proposal on their local option sales tax if they wanted to put that on the ballot and approve it. I'm not sure how much time there is left to get that on the August ballot, and you'd want to get that approved if you're going to do it as early as possible in the fiscal year, which starts July 1st. But there's a lot of stuff to do to put things on the ballot today that weren't around in 1980. So I'm not sure how that would work. Mayor Cooper did show some interest in a sales tax increase back when he was running for council. It was one of the things to look, not only for council, but for mayor last year. He showed some interest in it. He didn't mention anything about it today, so I don't think it's in his plans right now.
So again, the headline today, a 32% property tax increase is what the mayor is proposing. A home worth $300,000 would pay $750 more in property taxes if that budget were to pass.
Yeah, Ben, I've called it the triple whammy. I mean, first you've got Metro's already current budget difficulties that came into this year. Then you've had what's happened with the tornado and the pandemic, and now you've got the third whammy, which is dealing with the costs of all those things and what that does to city government and having to pay 32% more in property taxes, perhaps.
An astounding time in Metro government. Is there hope, in your opinion, that maybe the federal government comes in? Is there some way that it doesn't have to be that kind of an increase?
Well, I mean, I suspect we won't find out enough about whatever. Now, the feds have already given some rounds of money, and the mayor made it pretty clear, and you saw the other cities that are having trouble too. We're not the only one in this kind of situation. And part of it is because of the strings that were attached and the uses that you could use that money that the Fed sent down here wasn't very helpful. For example, we could spend some of that money probably to hire a lot of the contact people that need to go out and check people out to see if they have the virus and then who else they've been in contact with, the contact tracers. We could probably hire an army of those people for a brief period of time, because I think the federal money would let you do that, but you couldn't use it to pay for current monies for firemen, policemen, EMTs, all those other kind of things. So I don't think we're going to see that coming in. But the Congress is looking at yet another relief bill. I think this would be the fifth in 6 weeks, depending on how quickly they get this one through. And it is looking like it's going to focus directly on state and local government. Now, it's unclear how much money that's going to be, and more importantly, what kind of strings will come with that. If it might allow that to do that. My guess is we won't know enough about that to be able to make a huge increase, a huge difference, and it might make a difference down the road. If it did happen quickly enough, maybe the council could amend the property tax rate down. Remember, at this point, the mayor has submitted the budget to the council. It's now the council's baby. They decide whether to increase it, decrease it, approve it, or disapprove it, and adopt their own. But hopefully they won't let the mayor's budget go in without default like what happened last year. But if they decide to do their own, perhaps if there's more federal dollars that they know is on the way and can be helpful, maybe there's a way to be able to reduce that number down. I suspect the mayor would support that if that money was there.
This is a day of mind-boggling numbers when it comes to the budget. One thing we know we cannot do is print money like they do in Washington. But the number, that's a mind-boggling number, we are projected to lose $470 million in revenue over a 16-month time frame. That's a result of the tornado a little bit, and primarily just the shutdown because of the coronavirus. We are hemorrhaging money.
Yeah, Ben, and I think that one thing we haven't talked about, primarily because the mayor didn't give any real firm figures about it today, most of the sales tax money that's collected in Nashville goes to schools, and he didn't really give a schools number. I assume it's included in his overall budget, but it may be because the school board has not adopted their budget yet. I think the mayor did send them word that he was looking for $100 million in cuts in their budget request. We don't know what impact that's going to be. I think the mayor indicated in what he put out that perhaps they're going to be held as harmless as Metro is, not having to lay off employees or do anything that would be really drastic. But I don't know how you cut $100 million out of that budget. It doesn't have some kind of impact unless Metro's giving some of the money. And he didn't indicate the money was going over from Metro over into school. So the whole school situation is still kind of a question mark right now.
And we'll have the director of schools on tomorrow night. So tomorrow night on OpenLine, we'll be talking with the director of schools. We're going to take a break. That kind of sets the table for the discussion. If you were on the line, hold on. Joe, Sherry, Lucy, others. If you want to call in, there's the number. 615-737-PLUS. 615-737-7587. We'll take a break. Be back right after this.